Welcome and thanks for coming to the Tract Futures public meeting webinar. And my name is Brett Milligan. I am part of the consultant team. I'm from UC Davis, Department of Landscape Architecture. And I would just like to start off by saying we had very much hoped to have this meeting in person with all of you. We had been looking forward to that for a long time. Given the pandemic, there is no way we can have a large gathering for quite some time. So we have switched to this web format, and we have tried to approach this as creatively as possible to see what opportunities it might give us that maybe we wouldn't have in person, both in the presentation and the way that we have tried to put together an online survey to give people a chance to really dive into the work that's been done on this project for the last year. So again, wish we could meet you in person, but we can't, so this is what we're going to try to do. So let me see here, okay. So purpose for this meeting. The first is to provide you, the public, an update on the project planning, designing, and stakeholder engagement thus far. The last we met with you was over a year ago, or no, sorry, just less than a year ago. It was last summer in July. So we want to catch you up on everything we've done since that time. Secondly, to present you with the current design concepts that have been developed through public input, project advisory committee, and the steering committee and consultant team. And third, provide a tutorial and a public release of the web-based survey in which you'll be able to view, evaluate, and rank the current design concepts as well as the no action alternative. So these first three things we're going to go through first, and we're just going to basically, last time we met with you, you said you'd like us to be concise and to the point, and so that's going to be about somewhere between a 50-minute hour presentation where we're going to put all that together. We're going to hold questions unless they're clarifying questions. If I say something that's confusing, we have Kathleen Barrage on the line who's going to be watching for that in the Q&A. If something needs clarification, we'll stop. But what we're going to do is that item number 4 is going to be the second half of this webinar, which is going to be open for all public questions, comments, and discussion. We're slated here to go till 5. If we have lots of questions, people want to talk longer, we'll go longer if need be. So that whole second half. So if you want to get on here and get all the information you need, that'll happen within that first hour. If you want to stay with us and stick around for the conversation, that would be great. But that's our purpose and agenda for this meeting. So let me back up. We did have a question as we start off here. Again, we're going to ask you a few of these polling questions, and you should see a pop-up poll question that just showed up on your screen. We're going to test this with this first one. And to get a sense of who is on the line with us, if you could answer both these questions. The first one's answering, where do you reside? Are you in or near the California Delta? Are you somewhere in California, or are you outside of California? So if you fill in one of those. And then the second question is, how familiar are you with the Tract Futures project? Not at all, somewhat. Maybe you've attended the public meeting and not since then. Or familiar and you've been keeping track of the project through project meetings, website updates, or through other means if you're part of the AC, the advisory committee or anything like that. If you could fill these both in. Typically we'll wait about 30 seconds when we pop these up, and then we get an answer to them. So let's see. 80% in the Delta and nobody outside of California. So we are very, very local. And second, how familiar are you with the Tract Futures project? 30% not at all, 16% somewhat, and 54% familiar. Okay, great, that helps us a lot. It's good to know who's on the line virtually. Okay. So these are the guidelines we've had for all our meetings. It's worked really well for us. I'll just quickly go through these. We did this at the last public meeting, just to try to be as productive as we can. Your creativity is encouraged. Think outside the box, and we welcome new ideas. Actively listen, build on the ideas of others to improve results. Disagreements are problems to be solved rather than battles to be won. Second, efficiency is important. If you would participate fully without distractions if you can. I know that might be hard given our format. Respect time constraints and be succinct. And third, civility is required. Treat one another with courtesy and respect. Be honest, fair, and as candid as possible. Be respectful of all viewpoints. In our previous meetings, everyone's raised their hands if they agree with these. We're just going to assume that is happening. A little bit about the webinar facilitation. The meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the project website. We'll try to have that up within about 24 hours after we finish this. We'll put it on the project website. All attendees cannot be seen and are automatically muted for right now. You can submit questions via the Q&A at any time. Clarifying questions will be addressed during the presentation, as we mentioned. Kathleen will just stop me if there's something that's pressing. All other questions will be saved for the Q&A at the end, where we'll have a deeper dive, and most of the team members are on this call as well and our technical expertise, so different panelists and so forth will be able to answer those questions. And you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom during the Q&A, and the facilitator will call your name and you'll actually be unmuted so you can ask your question and people will actually hear your voice. Okay, so that's general guidelines. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into the actual content now. And this is a graphic we showed, or a version of this at our public meeting of how we have approached this project, where at the beginning we met with you, hopefully you can see my cursor, and really sort of talked about what are the objectives of the project. Do you agree with these objectives? Are they representative? And we have done this, then gone through a series of meetings with an advisory and a steering committee, which I'll show who those people are. And now we're back here at this point for public input on what we've worked on since that time. And then we have the second point where we'll go through the consequences, trade-offs, work towards a decision, and towards design environmental documentation, and take it forward from there. So this is the general process. We've been going through a very iterative design process with our advisory and steering committee, and now bringing it back to you. These are the members of our steering committee. Again, these folks are the senior agencies responsible for decision-making, funding, and implementation of the project. So you can see there's quite a variety here. These are ranging from state to regional to local agencies. And this is our advisory committee. There's 2 pages on this one. And these are basically trying to be representative of stakeholders and people who have an interest in this design project, whether that is a local landowner, homeowner, local water agency, a realtor, the marina operators, business owners, yacht clubs, etc. So you can see all the folks that are on here and have been very generous with their time in helping us with this project. As well as these folks here, so Fisher Creek people, Bass Association representatives, and so forth. So this committee has been feeding in directly to and advising us on the design of and planning of the project. And this is our planning team, the consultant team for this project. We are led by ESA Associates, and Michelle Orr is the leader of that. Again, I'm from UC Davis. And then we have Compass Resource Management, the Dangermond Group, Economic Planning Systems, Moffitt and Nickel. And independently, we have Bruce Hobart and Lars Anderson. And then DWR, Department of Water Resources, has been working with us on the hydrodynamic modeling. So about our process, the image on the left is from our public meeting back last summer, where we asked, again, all of you to come together. And that was our starting point. And then the image on the right shows one of our smaller meetings with this advisory and steering committee groups to actually work through and the designs and how actual like charrette style, like here people are looking at some of the design concepts and evaluating them and going through that. So this just gives you a taste of what we've been through. And our project goals. So overall, our statement is to provide enhanced recreational opportunities and other community benefits, benefit native and desirable species by reestablishing natural ecological processes and habitats, and improve water quality. So overall, we see these as 3 equal standing goals: recreation and local economy, water quality, and ecology. The first round of this project, the feasibility study, met water quality and ecology requirements, but did not meet the recreational and local economy. We heard you loud and clear. And more or less this entire last year of this process has been to try to bring in that 3rd tier and balance these and see if there's a way that the project can meet all of these criteria and sort of be beneficial to all. And that's been the challenge. And you'll see there on the other side, those are the 7 broad objectives that we will be evaluating the project throughout this. That have been
Hey Brett, if you can hear me, your Wi-Fi seems to have stalled for a minute.
And now you're muted, Brett.
I'm back. Is everybody else back?
Yep.
Okay. Is the poll question popping up? It's not popping up for me.
Not yet. No, and you're not sharing your screen anymore either. You could
okay.
reshare your screen.
Okay. Hold on 1 second.
We kind of lost you for about 30 seconds there, Brett.
Okay, so where was I?
Starting with the user survey, just before the user survey. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So did this all come across to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we're through there. Okay. So last summer, we asked you what you thought about the tract. We would like to know how many people on the line filled out this survey for us.
Responses are still coming in.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so we have a lot of other people on the phone. So we did have, I can't remember the exact number, but we had quite a lot of people fill in that survey, and only 36% of those people are on the line right now. So we have other people on here as well. So what I'd like to do next is to go through what we heard from, I think it was 300 some odd folks of maybe even 400. Those are the numbers that we got. I'm going to go through the highlights of that survey and what we learned from you in terms of what you value about the tract. And this is a breakdown of who, when we asked what do you most identify with, this was the breakdown. So this kind of fits with what we've heard on the call too, locals, a lot of locals on the line, but recreational boaters, anglers, residents, tournament anglers, and hunters were predominantly the people we heard from in the survey. And we asked you, where do you recreate in the tract and what do you do at this location? And these were the dots you filled in. So clearly a lot of recreation. Again, this is a state park, and a lot of types of recreation. There you see the legend on the bottom there of boating, canoeing, fishing, hunting, jet skiing, kayaking, kiteboarding, picnicking, and an other category of which there's many other on the pink. So lots of recreation around the edges, a little cluster in the middle, but very prominent usage in Frank's Tract and Little Frank's Tract. Secondly, we asked, what are your regular boating routes to get across and within the tract? And very clear patterns emerged with that, looking out from Bethel Island, where the marinas are and the bass tournaments come out, and how people come across the tract and which ways they go across here from False River down to here. You'll see this comes up again later when we talk about navigation, but we are very clear that navigation is a prime interest and concern in the tract, and it's very highly used by boaters. Third, we asked you about public access, and we got some very mixed responses to that. Some people calling for more, some people saying leave it alone, it's great as it is. And as our process working with our advisory committee, what became clear about this through some of the other questions we asked is half the people were, a lot of people were concerned about public access potentially competing with the marinas and current businesses, which we're very aware of. And other people were worried about potential derelict activity amongst public access and so forth. So I'll go into this more when we get into the designs, but this is what we heard from you. Where could tidal marsh best be located if it was to be located in the tract? And this is showing overlaps of the responses to that. So where you see the brighter green is higher overlap. And so you see the places where people were thinking of that were Little Frank's Tract and the northeast top of Frank's Tract. And that'll become apparent again when we get into the designs. We asked you what are the areas of the tract that most need improvement. So these are some of the responses. You can see the polygons that people drew cover the entire area, but a lot of them are about boating hazards, snags, or about aquatic weeds. We know some people really like the weeds for fishing. Other people really don't like them because they foul up their props. People would like some more navigable channels, maybe deeper channels, things like that. So we know that there are many things about this tract that people like, and we know that there's many things that people don't like, and some trends that are happening that are disagreeable. So what all of this has tried to feed into the designs to try to see, in some ways, basically, how can we diversify the tract in some ways to meet all of these different desires. So that was a quick tour of our survey, the user survey that we did before. And now we would just like to walk you through the process we've been through since we last met with you, that we've gone through with our advisory committee and the steering committee along with our team. So again, on July 11th, that's when we last met, where we did the project kickoff, did an overview and introduced you to our team. And then we followed that on 8/29 with our first advisory committee workshop. Again, these are smaller, so we can actually work things through and work on the design. And in that, we took information and received information based on the project goals and objectives we had put out there and revised those. And we also were asked to put together a no action alternative of a scenario of how the tract might change over time, which we've been working on, and shared the results of the survey. And then we had this, the main part of it was this design charrette where we introduced 7 very different concepts for the design of potential design for the tract. The no action alternative, which we have carried throughout the design process and still continue to work with. And then these 6 other designs that were very different. 5 of them met project objectives. This one here did not so much. It just had a little bit of land mass. But you can see in these very different configurations of how land could be massed in here in terms of creating wetlands, tidal wetlands within Frank's tract. And so we put this before the advisory and steering committee, and they voted on it to say, you know, what works, what doesn't, and these were the results. This was the most preferred, this eastern landmass where it would all be pushed to the eastern edge. This middle landmass was rated second. And then we had these 2 here that were, people wanted to hybridize this concept into one, which was this sort of open water berm and channel combined with some of the marina and cove elements of this one.
Hey, Brett, I might interrupt you for a minute for a clarifying question here, sure. Which you kind of got at, but I want to make sure that it's answered. We had a question about who was doing the preferring through these alternatives.
Okay, great question. So who was doing the preferring was the advisory committee and the steering committee. And I will say we tracked both of those. So all those names that you saw before. And the interesting thing is as we went along, there was some difference between the advisory committee and the steering committee. But as the process went along, they aligned as we went through. So those were the voters. It wasn't the team members. It was just the advisory committee and the steering committee. And if I would say that's okay, great. Okay, so this was our first meeting. This is what the results were based on that feedback. And I will say on those, it was qualitative as well as ranking. All of the people there were able to give us their ideas, draw out these ideas, say what we might do differently. And it was gave us a lot to work with. So then we went from this and we revised those 3 that we had gotten feedback on. And again, went through the design concepts, reviewed our methods that we were developing, which we'll get into, I'll show in a little bit, the performance metrics, and some initial hydraulic modeling. And again, we put these refinements out for these 3, again, with the, still same overall configuration. This is the one that was hybridized from the 2. These are the central landmass and eastern landmass. And we had another design session and another feedback. And this is what happened this time, where the most preferred became this central landmass, where if you remember in the last one, this was in the lead. This one fell to the 2nd place. This one remained in 3rd, and the no action was the trailer at number 4. So from there, we took these 3 designs, and based on what we heard, we got a lot of feedback on those, did a deep dive on these 3 in terms of extensively hydro modeling them, modifying them based on the findings of that, We had a design charrette with the parks and went through and looked at a lot of concepts of actual feature design, where to locate a lot of recreational features within these designs. And basically, you're seeing just as a diagramming a lot of our iterative process of trying to further develop these to meet the project objectives that I'll go through a little bit more detail later. So then we came back again. And so taking these revised concepts, again, you can see the overall massing is staying the same. These are refinements on what we had, and we adjusted these, adjusted channel widths, sort of more minor configurations, and came up with these three. Had another round of feedback. Results were pretty much the same. Most preferred actually became much more strongly preferred. Second stayed the same, and this one is third. And the no action was the least preferred out of all of these. So we have since, from that last meeting, that was just before the pandemic hit, excuse me. And since that time, we have further refined these. So we now have the fourth round of concepts that are based off of this. And this is where we are now with you, where we want to know what you rate these at based on how we've developed them this far. Okay. So that is our process and basically leads us up to date now. So what I'd like to do next is to take you through these concepts, the four that we have, the no action and these three designs. So beginning with the no action, again, we worked on a scenario of this based on a lot of technical expertise of how the tract is changing, the increased prevalence of aquatic weeds, and some of the things that are both desirable and not desirable at Frank's Tract. So just working my way around here, we know that folks really don't like the temporary salinity barrier. It's disruptive, it's also costly, and that's one thing that's a negative that is likely to potentially happen to happen more depending on if we get more droughts, as a lot of predictions are looking towards. A lot of these remnant levees of Frank's Tract, Little Frank's Tract that shelter Bethel Island, they're eroding and eventually will be gone, or gaps are appearing in them. So people are really concerned about those and around Little Frank's Tract. On the positive side, boating and fishing is as we've mentioned already, very important to folks out here, as are the bass tournaments. Bass tournaments being both a recreation and a huge economic part of life here. Boating hazards, it's one thing that people don't like. There are many boating hazards, not just these kind of snags and things that are out there, but also shallow depths and things like that. Or those remnant levees with rock below them that people, if they're not in the know, crash into. Hunting, we have hunters who've been out here for a long time, very into this as a place with a very knowable registration system that they can use. The weeds, again, we have heard different things. A lot of people who fish for some of the sport fish like the weeds. A lot of people on boats don't like the weeds. So how might we, that's a question on both sides. And the lack of an actual land base for recreation and the eroding beaches. There used to be a lot more beaches out here and they've gone away. So there's a lot of demand for more of that. So this was sort of the scenario we built, again, with advisory and technical input. So, and can then compare that with the designs that we've put together so far. So I'm going to talk more about this first one just to give you, so it's very clear what's being represented in here. So the greenish areas you see, these are the massings of land that would be tidal marsh, and the darker areas are upland areas. And the way that these would be created is you see these darker areas in the dashed. These are where the material would be dredged from. So going down as deep as, minus 25 feet or deeper, depending. These have been generally sized to be enough to create these areas that you see. So overall, the main move or construction part of the project is dredging it all out, a cut and fill operation to dredge it out to build these land masses. So this one, the way this one works as a, controlling water quality is the land mass is here. This is the navigable channel through here. This is a 100-meter bottom width for the width of this channel. And then you see what we're showing here on the X's. These are the existing marinas. And again, for all the designs, we have not proposed any public access on Bethel Island. The residents there told us they don't want it. And in many ways, the marinas do provide public access. They have restrooms, and we've heard in many ways what they can provide and the price they can provide it at is better than what might be otherwise available. So no public access has been proposed on Bethel Island. We are proposing a potential non-motorized boating up here, up where the ferry is on Jersey Island. And some of the other concepts you'll see down here where we are proposing a potential state parks operation area on North Holland Tract, a place where parks could manage this new park area with these lands in here. What you'll see here are the levee improvements. This is common to all of the designs along here, along Bethel, along here, these here, also along Little Frank's Tract. Little Frank's Tract is the same in all three designs. We had a lot of agreement on here of this inner area being for non-motorized boating. It's it's more safe. It's a place where people could go pretty easily. And this other half being tidal wetland with channels that people could go up through. The little orange slivers you see here, these are beaches that would be created. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Oh, actually, this one also has a little swing beach down here as well. The orange dot, or sorry, the yellow dot indicates a public day use area or potentially a campsite area that would be up on this higher ground near the upland area. And then you see this one here is a mooring area for large boats that could come in off of here, combined with this beach day use area and a dock, another mooring area here. I think that mostly covers this one. One other thing that's also common to all the designs is from an ecological point of view, this stretch along False River is considered a migration pathway for fish, such as salmonids. So we have put more upland vegetation along here, and this is considered, has been designed as a corridor to encourage fish to go this way rather than down this way as a way through. So that's that one. These next two I can talk to you a little faster now because you understand the symbology here. So with this one, unlike the last one, it sort of moves the landmass a little bit into the middle of the tract, overall creating these two large pools on each side. In front of Bethel Island, you'd have this much deepened area. This would all be a deepened pool, again, down to -25, which I didn't mention this in the last one. A lot of stakeholders like this because it makes the waters more navigable. Because if you go down deep enough, you reduce the weeds. Eventually you go down deep enough, the weeds can't really take purchase in the way they do there. So you can boat across this more easily. Again, same configuration for Little Frank's Tract, potential non-motorized boating over at Jersey Island, down over at the state park access with this sort of nice, slower water area for non-motorized boating. A beach and cove here for anchoring, another beach here, another anchoring area here, and again, this beach over here. Still that same migratory corridor along the upper edge up along the top. And again, this is another deepened area here and a deepened area here where again, these dredged areas have been sized to build the amount of land mass we have, and it takes into consideration compaction and the type of material and so forth. Where we've been able to, we have tried to preserve open water areas, those shallow areas that hunters like to, for their blinds. And I'll talk more about hunting later, but we're also looking at bringing hunting into these marshes, whether it's through the creation of hunting ponds. For any hunters out there, very similar to Sherman Island, where you have the marsh and the ponds there, but with a more registered system like what's in Frank's Tract right now, or a free range system through here. So overall hunting opportunities would be diversified, but there is some trade-off with some loss of the existing blinds. One benefit that one has of this design has one channel through it. If you look at this one, there are two navigable channels. Again, these are each a 100-meter width bottom of the channel to allow for fast water access through here and through here. And one other thing I forgot to mention is we put a lot of effort down on this corner down here. We understand that this sharp edge on Holland Tract is very dangerous. People come up through here. There's a lot of winds that come across here, and it's hard to navigate, and you can't see because people come from the other direction. So we've actually tried to improve the safety here by making this a more gradual turn so that you come into here. It's also protected by the wind to make this safer and so that you can get through easier. That's also, in this one as well. It sort of makes it so there's not that sharp turn through there. Things we've added in here, this is again, these are also all the levee fragments that have been bolstered along here and all along here. We have left little gaps in here for fishing. This was suggested by some of our fisher folks that said, you know, those velocities that are created for the sport fish, these might be fishing opportunities, so we added those in as well. I think I've covered that one as well. Okay, and then the last one is that eastern landmass. So this one pushes the land all the way to the east as much as you can and creates, again, 2 navigable channels through the same width. Again, softens this corner so it's easier to get around and through. Another large pool in front of Bethel Island that would be dredged out to build these land masses. No public access other than the private marinas that operate on Bethel. 2 potential public access points here. Same configuration of Little Frank's Tract. And then these 2 more anchoring areas here, these kind of sheltered coves with the beaches and day use areas, a dock here, the beach here. And in all of them, we're proposing a little restoration to Swing Beach down here, which we know a lot of locals like because it's easy to get to from Bethel Island. And same corridor for fish along the top up here. This area here, again, is preserved for hunters as well as within the marshes. So that's an overview of each of the designs as they are now. Just to go over some of broadly the benefits that come through on these designs as they are. Improved boating access through dredging, channel deepening, and associated reduction in aquatic weeds. The potential new recreational features within the existing state parks area, such as beaches, sheltered coves and anchorage areas, day use areas, and enhanced conditions for kayaking and wildlife observation. Improvements to remnant levees that provide wave sheltering adjacent to Bethel Island and Little Frank's Tract, while maintaining these open water views and marina access to Bethel Island. We know that is a strong priority for a lot of landowners and people there, that view be maintained. So these designs all reflect that. The creation of large areas of tidal marsh, riparian channel edge, and ecologically valuable features that benefit a lot of species. I'll do a breakdown of that a little further on. Increased food production or food web production to benefit native and sport fish. Improved water quality for human use by reducing salinity in the central and south delta. And potentially improved water supply reliability by reducing fish entrainment. So those are the goals overall. And what I'd like to, the last part of this is really going through the criteria and the structured decision-making process that we've gone through in this project. Again, these are those 7 objectives I pointed out before, the broad ones: navigation, recreation, ecology, water quality and supply reliability, flood protection, local economy and community, construction impacts, and cost of the project. So what you're seeing here is the roll-up of all of these things and how they rate. So all these ones, these kind of charts I'm going to show in the next little bit. What's green is preferable. Most of these are on a 1 to 10 rating. So 10 is best and it's green. 0 or 1 is the worst. So you can see overall, you know, how these each rate in terms of the concepts A, B, and C versus the no action. Just in case it's not clear, concept A was that the berm, that first one with the single navigable channel. Concept B is the central landmass, and concept C is that eastern landmass with the one all the way to the edge. So you can see that flood protection is one we're still working on. These are still all in process, and we welcome any feedback on how we've done this. And I'm going to give you a little taste of how we've done it, so you can, you know, just see how it is that we're trying to work through this. And what I'll do is I'll start with navigation and recreation and work through those to give you an idea. So do we have a question? Yes. So first question, how many people on the line are a boater and or a fisher? And a second follow-up question, what would you say are the 2 most critical factors for creating high quality open water fishing areas? And you have 5 options there, you can choose 2.
Answers are coming in. We'll give it a few more seconds here.
70% are boaters. Right on. What would you say? Pool's edge habitat, 43%. Water quality, 55%. Size of the pool water is only 7%. That's really interesting. Number of fishers and other recreationists, no overcrowding, 27%. Easy boat access. Great, thank you. That's quite helpful and good to know. Okay, so again, I'm going to go through, this is, again, the broad categories. What I'm going to do is open these up and start to show you how we've worked them through. So navigation is built on 2 parameters, travel distance and boating safety. So if you look at these 2 diagrams below, these were, again, based on our survey and talking with a lot of folks about, how do you move through the tract on your boat? So these are these distances that are going through there. So any design we're going to put in here that's going to put a landmass is going to change how you might circulate through, right? It changes the travel distances. So we measured all of these. So what you see here for travel distances, as the tract is right now, it's all open, right? So you can go anywhere. And granted, there are snags and things as well, so we'll get there. But it's open versus this is how it changes with the 3 concepts. And the other parameter here in terms of navigation is boating safety. So I'm going to now open this up again. So we're getting under the hood. So this is how we're doing this. Again, I'm just opening up these drawers here so you can see how we did this. So again, for travel distance, it's the increase in the average distance. So again, the no action, totally open. Concept A, 18% increase. Concept B, 8%. Concept C, 6. So these are how much it's adding to the percentage of travel time. So
right, we've got another question here.
Sure, yeah.
And it's who decided the results of this project? So kind of where did the coloring come from and the scaling here?
That, Dan, can you be unmuted? I think that's a question for you.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, so each of the kind of specialist discipline leads came up with their methodology and this is a good example that we see right in front of us here that, all of those distances are actually measured of what the increase in travel distance would be and related that to the calculation of the increased time it would take. And and some of those are physically able to be measured like these, and you'll see a number of good examples of that. And in other cases, like the boating safety down below, it's partially based on analyses and partially based on a judgment of each of the specialists on our team. So overall, because we were trying to compare from navigation to ecology to cost and everything, we tried to develop a consistent way of rolling everything up into 1 to 10 scales so that we can kind of compare across the board.
Thanks, Dan. And I would just like to clarify that we are seeing other questions, but we're going to hold some of the bigger questions until our Q&A session. So we see some questions, but hang tight until we get to the answers after the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. I would just also, again, reiterate that these are still a work in progress, and we will be posting these to our website, and these are open for discussion. If you think we have done this several times with our advisory committee to ask for feedback on these, how we've developed these to make sure that they're right and it's transparent and how we're doing it. So if you see problems with them, we would like to hear that. So let me pick up where I was. So again, this shows all those distances and how we got that. And then boating safety, you'll see that now breaks out into 3 subcategories: channel criteria, which has to do with water velocity, what is the velocity of the water going through there, channel depth, which most of what we're showing in the projects is making them deeper, so they're improved. Channel width, for our channels, again, 100 meter or about 400 feet or somewhere in here, versus the wide open of the tract. And then boating hazards. There are, many boating hazards within Frank's tract that we've heard about, and submerged hazards. These would be removed in the designs that have been proposed, and these hazards would be improved. And then the last one here, and we're welcome to hear feedback on this one as well, is conflicts with recreation. You know, with these designs that have been introduced, you would be getting other types of recreation coming in there, maybe other types of boaters. So, you know, there may be a trade-off there between, you know, what's there now versus, you know, a more, you know, diversifying some of that recreation. So that's how that one was decided. So again, we started with one column. This shows you the full thing. You know, there's a lot here. It's not meant for you to be able to take in all this right now. It will be on our website, but we just want to make sure you understand how we're going about this. This is a rendering of to scale of one of those channels that would be going between the islands at a 100-meter. Again, this 100-meter bottom with a -2 meter, you know, varies a little bit in terms of that, but to allow for fast water boating across the tract. Recreation criteria. So opening that one up, that was based on the parameters of fishing, motorized boating, non-motorized boating, shoreline recreation, and waterfowl hunting. So you can see the overall, this is the no action, how that rated, and this is how it rated across the 3 concepts in terms of some of the recreation improvements we tried to bring in. So if we open this one all the way up, you can see how we're doing that. I'm not going to go through all of these because it's a lot, but you can see within fishing, that's sport fish habitat, fishing access. Under motorized boating, the opportunity, like how much area you actually have, open water configuration. Beaches, there really aren't many now, and you know, we would be introducing about 4 new beaches, so that's a big plus. Mooring areas, kind of 0 for that, and adding to those. Non-motorized boating, again, the opportunity, the beaches, the public shoreline facilities, shoreline recreation, number of beaches and public access, and then waterfowl hunting, which I'm going to talk specifically about that one. So these are some renderings from the model, from the designs, and this is sort of looking at potentially Little Frank's Tract of that beach that would be there. Again, with a channel that you can't see it in this image, but connected to the marsh, but an area where there's boating within here and a beach for recreation. Sheltered coves and anchorage areas for, you know, the boaters that are out here, so you get shelter from the wind. There are these beaches where you can pull off, or, you know, smaller boats can bring their boats up on the beach like we know people do, and have a spot to, you know, have your lunch, let your kids get out and get some energy they can't get off in the boat, etc. And then hunting. Again, I mentioned we were looking at different ways that this might be configured. And the way we have it, we have not given this a number yet. And but what would happen with any scenario that we're doing right now is we would be adding upland habitat, which there isn't right now. And from talking with wardens and people who work in the waterfowl protection, that those upland habitats are really good for the reproduction of these birds and is helpful that way. But the one drawback of what we're doing with any of these introductions of a landmass is you're going to lose some of the open water blinds. That's inevitable by bringing in the landmass. So there is a reduction there, but there is a possibility to introduce a lot of marsh-based blinds that would go up way more than what we have. So overall, it's a diversification of the hunting opportunities, but we don't know exactly how that sits with people. And so we're still working on this one. And so we have some questions for you. So first, are you a waterfowl hunter? And if you are a hunter, would diversifying hunting habitats within Frank's Tract, including upland, tidal marsh, ponds, and different depths of open water, be desirable if access and registration methods remain similar to the current situation? We have some. I am not a hunter. Okay, so we do get some hunters. I was wondering when we asked this question if we were going to get 0 hunters, because I will say one of the hardest things we've had is being able to engage a broad or significant number of hunters out there. We have a couple on our advisory committee, but it's been really hard to get full participation or really talk with a lot of hunters. So we are trying to do more of that, but this is good to know that diversification is a plus for those who are out there. And some of them are saying no, but this is something we're still working through and trying to nail down. So any input you have on that would be great. excuse me, local economy and community. So this one breaks down into 3 categories: business effects, real estate, and aesthetics. A lot of commonality across all of these. Now, these are the 2 you've already looked at, the overall score: navigation and recreation. Same for real estate, navigation and recreation, but we're also bringing in aesthetics, which is this last category. So again, we know that open views are really important to the people who live there now. So, you know, Frank's scores a 10. I do question the 10 because I know that everybody there also looks out at those degrading levees, and it makes them very anxious. So there's another trade-off there, but these are how they ranked here with, again, with concept C, that eastern landmass, you are preserving the biggest amount of open water between Bethel Island and Frank's Tract. So there's a variable there. We did, in one of our advisory committee meetings, we did a survey of what kind of features and how those look and what people prefer. And there is a strong preference for a sort of naturalistic look, less constructed look. So a lot of along the waterways, you would have a softened edge that would be vegetated, and there was a lot of preference for that. So that's some of the features that would be built up under the designs. And then reducing the amount of aquatic invasive species. So that would be significantly improved by the 3 designs. Water supply and water quality and supply reliability. So this breaks down into 3 categories: water quality in terms of salinity. Again, this is for exporters and in-use Delta folks, and emergency drought protection, and supply reliability, which is a function of entrainment of fish. So what I'm showing here, what's in these 3 graphics are the salinity modeling, showing the 3 concepts with a 100-meter width for the channels. And if it's red, it's going more saline. If it's blue, it's less. And if it's whitish, it's sort of negligible. So this is just a sampling of the modeling that you can see here. And then if we expand this out, so the salinity part was, these are where the stations are that measure this, which actually put the controls on what that salinity is. So this is how this was modeled to look at what the levels were. And then there's the emergency drought protection. Again, this is the barrier that goes in. That is a big negative that we know people don't like. According to the modeling that's been done, the projects would actually lead to the need for that drought barrier to come in less often. So there's a significant benefit here of not having to put it in as often. And then supply reliability, the fish entrainment, we found that there was a significant reduction for smelt. So that's why those numbers are higher there than the existing condition. Sort of a wash for salmonids based on a variety of reasons that our technical experts can supply if that's of interest. We also checked water velocities, largely the importance for boating, so that navigability is preserved. If the velocities get too high, it's hard to boat. So what this is showing just how on the left side, how velocities work in Frank's Tract as it is. So you can see the more brownish to red, the higher the velocity, going up to 4 feet per second. And you can see there's a lot of velocity coming down False River into the tract, and there's the nozzle that brings that salinity in. And this is a comparison with the concept B, the central landmass. Where what you see is these landmasses then soften this velocity through here. This is much less. And then you get some higher velocities through the 2 channels where it crosses through. And then there's a little bit of a new higher velocity created here. So more or less what it does is it kind of disperses those velocities, if you will. And you get, particularly in the channels, probably in worst case is 3 feet per second, which it'll typically be less and less than many of the existing channels. And the velocities that are in here should help abate weed colonization because they don't root as much when you have that velocity going through. So I've this slide distills a lot where we worked with changing and manipulating the channels and their widths and their dimensions and their depths to try to find a sweet spot between water quality, navigability, and velocity. And this is sort of, we've come down on this 100-meter bottom width as kind of the ideal that we're looking for. Ecological performance. Again, thinking very broadly about the ecological benefits in terms of Chinook salmon and Delta smelt listed species. but also for sport fish such as largemouth bass, striped bass, and waterfowl. And so these are how those rate across all of these from the no action versus the 3 concepts. So this breaks down into those 4 categories of special status species, sport fish, conditions for native species, and conditions for aquatic weed spread. So again, if we go under the hood, I don't expect you to take all this in now, but just giving you a taste of how we've done this. This is again with a lot of technical expertise on these fish and looking at how we quantify what kind of habitats would be created, whether it's the special status species, the sport fish, conditions for native species, and conditions for aquatic weed spread, which would be reduced in the concepts. Whoops, excuse me, that was my mouse. So that's the deeper dive. I won't go through all of that now, but we can take questions on that if people have it. Flood protection, again, we're still working on this one. Those are in process. We'll hopefully have that soon. But we do have the sheltered levee. You know, the projects would all put improvements in on those degrading levees, so those are much higher than the existing condition. And then construction impacts. So if we didn't build the project, it's a 10, right? And it's a big deal to build this project. It would take somewhere in the realm of 4 to 6 years to build it. And again, that is mostly just moving that material to create the land masses, and it would be done in a staged way. So certain parts of the tract, while you're creating that island, would be closed off while it's built, and then you build one, then you move on to the next one and move on to the next one. So that's a significant disturbance, based on a no action, in contrast to a no action alternative. But then balancing that with, we know that people really don't like the drought barrier because that's a big disturbance and has to be brought in and has to be brought back out. So again, there's that benefit of the concepts reducing the frequency with which that has to come in, which is a benefit. So then you see the overall scores of 6 and 4s. So no doubt there is an impact of actually the construction time and the loss of benefits during that construction time while it's happening. And this is the project costs. Clearly the red is it would take a lot to build this project, and versus not having it be built. And that would be, if this goes forward, thinking about how the project would be funded. And operation and maintenance, if we create all of these landscape features, there has to be a way that they are maintained and operated. And that has been made very loud and clear to us by the stakeholders involved, that that's really important. People are very concerned about, okay, if you build it and then you just let it go derelict, that's a big problem. So anything that would go forward would address that and make sure that there was funding dedicated for ongoing maintenance costs and things like that. Okay, I think that's a run through of the 7 performance criteria we've developed. Again, these are not finalized. They're very open to feedback. If you think we've got our numbers or we're rating them in a way is not accurate, we welcome feedback on that, and we will put this on our website. And again, as it is right now, this is the preferred concept that we have, the central landmass, but that's just so far. What we want to know is what you think, and what you think of the designs. So I just have one last thing to cover in my presentation, and what it's going to be is a walkthrough of the public online survey that we've made that we'll be releasing as soon as this webinar is over.
So Brett, this gets at one of our questions here, is somebody who's relatively new to the project and is asking kind of about more outreach and how to be involved. And so I think this will start to get at the answer to that.
Yeah, no, I kind of forgot what I wanted to say here. It's so important that we get your feedback and you send this out to whoever you think it might concern, because this is the only way we're going to know if we're meeting what we're trying to do here. This is your chance to affect this process and to say, well, I think this is great. I think this maybe is not so great. I really, I'll show you as we go through it. We're looking for very detailed information here, and this is all about if we can find a way to make this worth people's while. So please send this survey out to whoever you think it would impact or would have an opinion about it. So I'm going to switch out of this presentation and switch over to this. Everybody seeing my screen? Still seeing my screen? Yeah, okay. All right, so we're going to provide you, if you go to that link, what you'll get is you'll open up onto this. And this is the user survey. And this uses the same software that we used for our last survey, the user survey. So if you did do that one, it'll be somewhat familiar to you. So if you come in here, it's going to come through and it'll tell you this is the opening page. If you want to go back and see the results that I went through, you can interact. This is a link to take you there and you can work. That's sort of an interactive map if you want to see the results of that. We will be uploading our presentation and provide a link here. So somebody who's new to this, I think that was part of the last question. If you know nothing about this project, everything we just talked through is going to be on the web, and people can come here and click, and hopefully they will before they do this, so they'll be informed of what they're voting on. And okay, so I'm just going to walk you through. So there's basically these tabs that you just click on. So that gives you the introduction. And then it says how to use this survey. I'm not going to go through all of this because I'm going to show it to you, but it gives you the information you need to know. And then what you need to do on this first page is you won't be able to advance until you answer these questions. So we have 2 questions at first. So, you know, who are you? And you can, whatever categories you identify with most, I'm going to say I'm these 2, which is true. And, or if we haven't covered you, you can say other, and then it's going to ask you for your zip code. So if you enter those, it'll let you pass. So the first one, the first option is the no action alternative. So by the way, you can just click around in here, and you can, if you use your mouse, you can zoom in and out. And this is basically showing the things I showed in that last slide for Frank's, where if you click on one of these dots, it's going to bring up, you know, some details, you know, degrading remnant levees, the continuing degradation. This is sort of talking about the trends and things that are going on in Frank's tract. So, you know, this is the hunting, talking about the hunting system that's out there now, right? So within that, you then have this what I like, what I don't like, or questions. So let's say I want to ask a question. And I'm kind of curious about what you said. And I read about the weeds that are out here, and I'm like, I have a question. Are the weeds getting worse with each drought? Right, so you could do this, and then we will answer that question as we get back on this feedback. So you can say what you like, what you don't like, add your questions. You can keep adding these pins, you know, whoops. You can just keep adding these. And again, every time you have to hit save, or if I realize I messed up, I can delete it, okay? So I go there. Ignore this stuff at the bottom. The only thing this is to show the map is just to get that out of your way. And then if you want to reopen it, just click this. It's not super intuitive, but that's how you get it back. We're working on trying to just remove this. And then if you click the next one, now you're going to go into the designs. So what you do when you open this one, it gives you a description of the design. And then you'll see that there's this little video box. And then there's these same 3 things, what I like, what I don't like, or questions. So if you click on this, it's going to give you a fly through of the design from way up in the air. And if you think that's a little small, I agree with you. If you hit this full screen button, you're going to come out and be able to see the whole thing. So, right. So for each design, it's a 1:40 video. And what it's going to do is take you in a counterclockwise around the track, so you can get a sense of the whole thing, starting from Little Frank's tract and working your way all the way around. So I won't show all this now. I'll just speed ahead. And you can see it brings you around. We're now up at the northeast corner and taking you around. So if you want to click out of this, just hit escape. And you'll see it keeps running in there. So then if you're in here and you're looking at this design, and you're looking at this and you're like, what I like. So I like this. I'm going to say, generally, what do you like about this place or feature? The location is great. The feature will be used and valued. And I want to add something else. Great that it accommodates your boats. And I'm a horrible typist. Right, so there's that one. And then what I don't like. Oops. This location is problematic. Access to this space or feature. I don't like this landform shape. Right, so you can add something like that. So you can add as many. If you wanted to put in 60 pins in here, you can. If you have, 5, however, you work your way through. Same thing, and then you just hit next. So same exact thing with this one, the pop-up window, if you want to open that up. The what you like, what you don't like are questions. You can put those all along here. Second one. Then this is the third. So the final one, the Eastern landmass. So these are all set up exactly the same. So once you do one of them, it's very easy. They're all the same type. So let's say I've, excuse me, I've gone through all of these. I've put all my pins, what I like, what I don't like, my questions, and I'm done. I then can go to the next page. And then this is important. This is where you get to tell us how you rank them out of the 4. If you like the no action alternative best, if you think the Eastern landmass, whatever you rank them. 1 is your highest, 4 is your lowest. So I'm literally not even looking at what I'm picking just to do this. So I would do that. And then if I had any other comments, I could fill them in here. If you want us to know general things about anything, you could put it in here. And then hit next. Okay, so this is the key page. So I've done everything. And let's say I decide, well, I actually left out a couple comments I wanted to make on that second design because I didn't realize it till later. You can go back. You can go through everything and go back to anything you want. And let's say, oh, I actually forgot to say that I don't like this. I'm not going to fill it in right now, right? And then I can go back. It keeps all your answers, so you don't have to worry about that. Then once you hit done, you can't go back. You're out. It's finished. But if you don't hit done, we will not get your responses. So make sure when you're done, that's why it has a nice little exclamation point here. Just make sure you hit done, and then we will have your input. And then that spits you out into the, back to our website. Okay, so I think everyone still see my screen? That is the presentation. So I think we are on time. Yeah, about an hour. And so from here till 5 or later, we can now take questions, the deeper questions or things, and we have most of our team members here and panelists to answer some of the technical or other questions you might have. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brett. We're going to be enabling a feature for folks to raise their hand, and then we will unmute you. So it may be a second until we get there, but we'll go through the raise hand feature here. So we've got a hand from Bill Wells. So we'll unmute him and get that question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, very good. Thanks for the presentation, Brett. The one option you leave out is just dredging Frank's track and then using the dredger spoils to reinforce the levees. I mean, to me, that would be an extremely viable option. I just question why you would not have that in there as an option. Obviously, doing nothing, it's going to be turned into a meadow at some point, but it was actually fairly free of underwater weeds 15 or 20 years ago before Department of Water Resources or Fish and Game, whoever gets the permit to clean out the vegetation, neglected to get it for a few years. So anyway, so the question is, again, why not just dredge it and use the dredger spoilings?
I think, I mean, if there's a few types of material out there in the tract. There is the sandier material that would be better for those levees, and there is the sort of peat layers that would not work well for the levees. Overall, I think that is the plan, is that we would be using whatever material we can in there, and we'd be using that for the wetlands. But it could also, those improvements, if the material is if there's enough there and we can use that, that material would be sourced locally. If it's not available, if we run out or don't have enough, then that would mean going somewhere else. But I think that is where that material would come from. And the sandier material is closer to Bethel Island. So in those areas, I would imagine that would be used. But it's much more cost effective to use whatever can be used locally. So I think we would try to do that.
And this is Michelle. Bill, it sounds like you might be asking whether there could be a much smaller project defined, much less expensive and much smaller. And you may be muted now, but
yeah, you'll have to re-raise your hand to be unmuted.
Okay. But you know, I would say that what you've laid out here that would have a lot of benefits, and it would definitely be a much more affordable project. And I think it really gets at the project objectives. And so we were trying to define a project here that would have these water quality benefits, which really do require these larger features across the site, and also ecological benefits, which we are accomplishing through adding a lot of tidal marsh. So I'd say, you know, working with what, you know, the objectives we were trying to accomplish here, that kind of set the direction that we were going. There could be definitely benefits with a smaller project that just had some of the elements as well.
Thanks, Michelle. And just a reminder, the raise hand feature should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you'd like to ask a question via being unmuted. And we've got one from Deirdre Desjardins. Sorry if I messed your name up.
Desjardins. It's
Desjardins. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, I'm kind of concerned about the amount of fill this would take and the amount that the levees need to be raised for sea level rise. It seems like they're sort of competing and there's only a finite amount of suitable material that's close to the delta.
Michelle, do you want to take that one? You want me to take it? You're muted.
Okay. Hi, Deirdre. Thanks for the question. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of land at low elevations in the Delta and a desire for more material for a number of uses. One, you know, and when this project had a previous incarnation, there was a search for all the kind of sources of fill material that could be brought to bear to build this project. And in the end, we decided that that dredging on site was going to be the best source of fill. I mean, that's kind of one of the best parts about this project is that you've got an on-site source of fill, which makes it a lot more feasible to construct. It is still a lot of fill. I'll agree with that, and that's driving the cost as well in the construction period. I think there is the opportunity to kind of refine the project to reduce the amount of fill, and that's something that we looked at a bit between round 3 and round 4. It's something that we expect would be looked at if the project moves forward into further planning to try to bring that number down. So you're really putting fill where it's providing the most benefit. But kind of at its heart, trying to create tidal wetlands out at Frank's Tract, you do have to raise the ground elevations a certain amount to get that kind of tidal marsh habitat.
Thanks, Michelle. We've got a hand raised from Larry, and there's no last name, so go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, how are you going to make the area around Jersey Island ferry a 5-mile-an-hour zone when that's a major area we travel through?
Can you pull up a map, Brett?
guess. Is Larry still able to be heard? Can Larry raise his hand?
No, Larry will have to raise his hand again.
Larry, I don't know if you're able to do that. I don't know if that covers. So the question was about at Jersey Island, right? About.
Yeah, actually, he had a written comment as well. So
Okay.
How are you going to make the area around the ferry at Jersey Island? So boats can, it sounds like it's boats getting from Taylor Slough, which is where that the ferry landing is, yeah, over to the ferry landing on Jersey Island. So just, I think a point of clarification is that there are no plans to make that path, that ferry path, a 5 mph zone. That would still be the same as it is today in terms of the boat speeds there. The area where we're talking about a 5 mph zone is inside Little Frank's Tract, and maybe you can point to that, Brett. So where Brett has his cursor, that would be set aside. You know, it's already a very shallow area with a lot of snags, and it's not very safe for any kind of fast boating. And the idea there would be to set it aside as a place for kayaking and keep it a low speed zone. But it shouldn't affect that the ferry path that you were referring to.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Larry.
Okay, well, I only asked that because you have an X there, and according to your little legend, it says public access point, non-motorized only. Right where that X is why I asked that question.
Got it. Brett, you want to elaborate a bit?
Yeah, it is a question. I would say one thing we have heard is, you know, is this, if you're an experienced kayaker, can you come around this way and come in? We do know the currents are stronger through here. The project does seem to reduce some of the velocities through here, but this would just be a place where you could put your boat in, but there is no change proposed along this channel. It was basically looking at alternative places where you might be able to access into here. But if that is, we have heard that some people have concerns about, you know, velocities being too strong here for boating, and in which case that also prompted the location of this one down here, which, you know, we initially had some ideas that were out on this edge, and people were like, that's a real bad idea because the velocities are too strong. So in two of the concepts, we have, you know, kind of created these little coves here, which could be a non-motorized boating area that would be much safer. So I think that is a question if this is a good location for this or not, if that really gets at your question.
All right. Thanks for the answers. We've got a question from Jan McCleary.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So I actually have two questions. The one is on that map right there. It looks like you're on the south side. You're blocking access from Old River to Piper Slough to go along into Sandmound and then up to Piper. Is that blocked?
Here?
I can't see where yeah, there.
Yes.
So how will big boats get to, for example, Bethel Harbor Marina to get the boats hauled?
What we're proposing is a new channel going this way that's safer.
How deep is that?
Deeper than what it currently, well, that's interesting, right? Because this is deep right here. It's not as deep as that, but.
And wider?
Yeah, this is wider, I think, because it is 100 meters, but it would, this channel is proposed is deeper than what currently exists.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sure big boats could get through there and still get to all the businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So my second question is, or recommendation, when you have your charts that take the inputs from everybody and the, you know, and you have your weighting and your colored, which options are better, I would say that that at some point there has to be, the choices need to be heavily weighted depending on the desires of the Bethel Island residents and business owners. Since they all want improved boating, fishing, and hunting, since those are their customers, and their economies are the ones that depend on it, and their views as they look out onto Frank's Tract from their homes, I think at some point it needs to go back just to them, the owners of businesses on Bethel Island and the people along the front, along Piper there, and they should really be able to make the final decision.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's an interesting idea, and we can try to do that. I also think if you can, I mean, I might follow up with you independently after this about how we make sure that the people, Bethel folks in particular, all try to fill out the survey so we can get them accounted in the results. But I think that's also, any stuff going forward specifically with Bethel Island residents would be important.
Yeah, Carl Wilcox from California Department of Fish and Wildlife is our client for this project. And he is on the line. He's made it clear that this project's not going to move forward unless it does have the support of people like those residents that you're talking about, Jan. And there was a number of those business owners were on the advisory committee, and then a slightly larger handful were part of the reach out on the local economy part of this project. And there was a series of interviews done right before the COVID pandemic. They were in person, and I think some of the follow-ups were by phone. But we recognize that, so that's an area where we've made some efforts, but there are certainly more people to talk to, and the project's not going to go forward unless there's support there.
All right. And let's see, we've got a question from Mark Goebel. Go ahead, Mark. Says you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you, Mark. There's a couple seconds to ask your question, and then we'll move on to the next hand. All right, we've got a question from Ron Petroche. See, there might be a delay. Mark, are you able to ask your question?
Folks don't have to unmute themselves, do they?
Yes,
No.
I do.
Oh, there he is.
There we
Ron.
go. There we got Ron.
Okay, I live on Sand Mound Slough, approximately a quarter mile from the Inn Dam and on the water. And my question is, how are you going to control a lot of the silt and the runoff from the building of the levees out there that you're planning? Because right now on Sand Mound, we're silting in so bad that a lot of people can't get their boats out of their docks. That's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. I wasn't aware of those current silting problems down on Sand Mound Slough that you're referencing. But we do know that when you're moving a lot of dirt out here during construction, there's going to be a lot of turbidity generated. And if that moves off-site and it goes into areas like what you're talking about, that's something that we want to avoid. Moffitt Nickel is our engineer on the team who's been looking at the constructability of the project. They had a couple ideas in that respect. The first one is that there would need to be turbidity control with any construction, and that would be required by the permits as well. to have either containment berms built all the way around where you're placing fill so that any kind of silt and sediment couldn't get out of your construction area, or to use silt curtains to keep turbid, silty waters from moving out of your construction area. That's a pretty major undertaking, but recognizing that that's might be what's needed. Also, he recommended doing our engineer recommended doing some pre and post construction surveys, like for example, in Piper Slough. Survey it before you start doing construction, and then after construction, if there has been siltation in Piper Slough, to use a clamshell dredge to dredge back out any silted areas. I guess another part of that would be the hydrodynamics, and just if the project moves forward and there's more detailed consideration of the designs, looking at those kind of issues more closely about how velocities might change and if it might cause siltation anywhere. Based on the analysis we've done so far with the model, that hasn't been showing up. So I think it's really construction, turbidity during construction that we're looking at as the larger issue.
All right. And we've got a question follow-up to that coming in our chat box that says, can present problem siltation areas like this be used as a borrow site for project objectives?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Kathleen?
Yeah, saying, can problem siltation areas like Sandmound Slough be used as a borrow site for project objectives?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for the follow-up there. See, we've got Larry on the line. Another question.
Yeah, so when you guys start actually doing the work, because I'm a hunter out there, so basically you just said it's going to take basically 4 to 6 years, maybe even 10. I know how the things work around with the state. So does that basically mean once you start working, there's going to be no hunting out there?
I don't think that's the case. I think from what, I don't want to say this definitively, but everything we've looked at where if you were to construct this, can you see my cursor? Like, that it would be, an area would be taken off, which, to create this very large feature here is going to at least, take off, maybe about 1/3 to 1/2 of the tract to cut it off, but it would be done in sections. It wouldn't be the entire tract at the same time, but you'd also have to have room for where they're pulling that material from. But I think it would be localized within the tract. I don't know exactly how wide, and Michelle, you might have more to say on that, but the idea is to do it in stages, so other parts of the tract would still be open. You wouldn't be like, fully closing off the entire tract at one time.
Yeah, but if you like just section B alone would take out probably, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 blinds alone. Just so as soon as you start to work on there, I mean, how are they going to do that? If you're in that blind area, you just don't hunt, or are they going to have a drawing for the whole thing that's open, or is there even a plan for hunting as far as what you guys are going to do once you start constructing?
So specifically the hunting plan during construction?
Yes.
That's a great question. I think we would try to, that's something for more thought, but I think we would try to minimize the amount of space that would be impacted during that time. But like you said, yeah, I mean, while they're building that, you're right. I think that's an accurate assessment of those blinds would not be available, and how exactly we would do that during that time, I think that is something for further follow-up.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe there's something you can do with seasonality of your construction there too, so that you can avoid some of the higher quality hunting areas during the hunting season, and plan your construction phasing a bit around that.
And then as far as the marshes go, I mean, to be honest, if you guys are going to allow hunting right away, it could be a good thing for everybody, fishermen, hunters, and everything. But is that going to happen? That would be part of my whole big thing is even wanting this to happen, is if you're actually going to let people hunt there immediately when these marshes are built.
Yeah, I do think that's the plan. I mean, Brett, you've been working a little more closely on the marsh hunting blinds.
I mean, yeah, I would say as long as it's, I mean, if it's going to take the marshes a little time to develop, but if it works for hunting, I don't see why not. And I mean, I think we would want to minimize that window as much as possible.
Okay.
So, yeah, so this is Carl Wilcox. I would expect that once the marsh platform is in place, that at least initially until the vegetation became more established, it would probably be pretty good hunting, particularly on higher tides.
Yep.
Larry, are you still able to talk? Oh, you are.
Yeah. No, I'm just listening. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just my whole concern on what it's actually going to impact, and you know, because basically we built these blinds that we all got for Frank's Tract. It's not like we can go take them anywhere else to hunt. That's
Yep.
where we, you know, and I'm getting, you know, it's getting to the fact that you guys do this. I mean, well, how long until you even think there's going to be, you guys are even going to start doing this?
Good question.
It's going to be, you know, quite a while. This isn't happening overnight. This is Carl Wilcox with Fish and Wildlife. You know, this is just the feasibility study and an effort to see if there's a project there that could actually be pursued. So, you know, if there is an interest amongst the local community, other agencies to pursue a project out here, then there would be a, you know, more detailed planning and environmental review process before anything happens. So you're probably looking at, you know, assuming we finish this and then there was an interest to proceed further, you're probably looking at, you know, 3 to 5 years to actually get a project designed, approved, to actually implement, you know, and all that's contingent upon there being a willingness to fund such activity.
Okay, so this brings up an interesting question, because it's making it sound like people around here want this project, and I really don't even see that really being feasible. I mean, it would surprise me if that's the case. So who's actually pushing for this project, and yeah, who would pay for it? Because this looks like very expensive. And one real safety concern I have are these long channels you have making through there that people are going to be whizzing around through, and then you're going to be pushing kayakers into these things. I mean, there needs to be to be honest, it looks like a very unsafe plan as far as the boating goes to me.
Carl, do you want to address the funding question, and I could address the channel safety question?
Sure. So the funding question really goes to the multi-benefit that are provided by the restoration scenario out here. So, you know, that's where it's not only the interests of the local community and meeting those relative to navigation, economics, and recreation, but also meeting fish and wildlife benefits and water quality benefits. And so that's why there are multiple categories that were evaluated to assess the various restoration approaches. You know, this effort started with a state-sponsored effort to look called the Delta Smelt Resiliency Strategy. And it looked at actions that could be taken to improve habitat for Delta smelt in particular. Following the initial feasibility study, it became clear that, you know, there needed to be a much broader consideration of interests, and not just for Delta smelt, but for the broader fish communities in general, as well as ecosystem processes and functions. And so that's why we have taken it to this next step to look at how we can potentially provide those benefits in a broader restoration project.
And then on the tidal channels within these land masses, some of them will be pretty large, kind of like you see in some of the tidal channels in Sherman Island along Sherman Lake, for example. It could be big enough to have kayakers and boats going at reasonable speeds. And then some of them are going to be pretty small and might be designated as no wake for the motorized boats. You know, we've been exploring ways of using signage and no wake zones to try to make areas safe. We might designate some of the channels, you know, only for non-motorized boats, for example, or no wake areas, so that you don't have those kind of safety issues. I think we haven't worked out exactly, you know, to that level of detail of where there would be fast motorized boating allowed or not allowed.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sounds like we should be thinking about it. So noted.
Thanks, Michelle. And we've got Mark Goebel up with a question next.
Micro this time.
It's a little bit choppy there, Mark, but we can sort of hear you.
Set up smoke signals. Thank you, Brett. You did a really good fast presentation there, and Kathleen, you're a rock star. I've got a lot of comments, but I'll just narrow it down to the kind of nuts and bolts. Has there been one of these tidal marshes that has been successful so far? I know that a few projects have been done with them. On Sherman Island, it seems like you know, they've been doing a lot out there, but the wildlife has pretty well disappeared. Has there been any success with the tidal marshlands? Is I guess my question.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Or Carl, you look like you have something to say. There have been a number of these kind of large-scale tidal wetland restoration projects, or, you know, various scale restoration projects proposed in the Delta. Only a handful of them have actually been constructed so far, and those are being monitored to look at the benefits. There is much more experience with this in if you move just a little bit west to San Francisco Bay, or in some other parts of the U.S. But in the Delta, there are some smaller project at Decker Island. There's a wetland restoration that's in the ground up on Lindsay Slough in the North Delta in the Cache Slough area, and then up on the northern part of Liberty Island. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but those are being monitored by researchers at DWR, UC Davis, others. Some have been found to have better you know, fish benefits in particular. I think you're asking about on your typed question. You know, they provide different benefits, you know, and then each of the projects provides a learning opportunity for the next project. But if you look at Liberty Island, for example, I know UC Davis has been doing the fish monitoring there, and they've been really surprised by the quality of the habitat and the fish use there. So that would be one example. But I'd say nothing has been done quite at this scale that's being proposed here. This is bigger.
I guess what I was saying, you know, Decker Island is one of the Sherman Island projects, just right there.
Is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah, well, I was talking about the whale belly, whale head, whale tail. What?
Yeah, I'm not so familiar with that one.
I've just noticed that there are no otters, there's no beavers, I don't think I've ever seen a delta smelt, so I can't tell you anything about that. But it just seems like there's a lot less wildlife now than there was 5 years ago, and even 10 years ago. A lot less than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if there was anything that was successful, proven so far, before you start something this large.
Yeah. So Mark, this is Carl Wilcox. The Sherman Island projects are primarily subsidence reversal projects. They are managed wetlands. They're not tidal. So they're basically cut off from, they're just a different version of kind of agricultural practice from growing corn out there, but focused on growing tules. So
there's no way for
so
us
they're,
to get there.
yeah. So they're very different than this type of activity, which would be more akin to Liberty Island, which Michelle was talking about, or the more recently completed Tule Red project in Sassoon Marsh that fronts on Grizzly Bay, and a lot of the work that's been done in the Napa Sonoma marshes and in the South Bay and San Francisco Bay.
Sure. Well, that would be a little bit more of a saltwater marsh, though, wouldn't it? This is more brackish, at least.
This is primarily fresh.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That was my first one. And then Brett, you mentioned something about a salinity barrier. To my knowledge, we haven't had that go in yet, have we?
The temporary salinity barrier?
Yes.
Yeah, that has gone in. I can't remember the year now. Someone's going to correct me on that one, but it went in on False River.
2015. Good.
Thank you.
On False
Thank
River.
you, Eli.
2015.
Not out on Frank's tract.
Well, it goes over. See where my cursor is? It's over in this area on False River, but yeah, not actually in Frank's tract, but over on this area.
Up there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
All right, and Mark, I know you do have some more questions, but in an effort to give some other people a chance here,
no worries.
We're going to move on and try to come back and hopefully address some of your questions.
No worries.
Thanks. All right, we got a question from David Riggs. Go ahead, David.
Hi there. Yeah, hi, David Riggs, Sugar Barge Resort. I don't see depicted on here the existing wave wall. And is that then to be removed? My first question. Second question is, dredge, is it possible to use dredge material out of Piper Slough? Is that part of the plan now at all? Piper Slough has become silted in pretty good, mainly because of the water weeds. If that could be worked into the plan, that would be a pretty big bonus, I think.
I was moving in, so I didn't get all of the question, but there is the wave wall right there. There in this design so far, there is no plan to change that. The opening would remain. I think there is one thing we did here is there was some degrading going on towards the edges here. So I think that would probably be bolstered by these levee improvements here, but that wall would remain.
Okay, and any possibility of using dredge material out of Piper Slough to deepen that to any degree?
Yeah, I think that was similar to the question that came up before too. I think that is a possibility. If it was the material, depending on what type of material it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a more expensive source of material, but we obviously see the benefit that you're pointing out and dredging out that slough.
Great.
All right, thanks, David. We'll take a question from Bill Wells.
Thank you. Have you surveyed all the businesses on Bethel Island to see if they want to continue with this project?
I wouldn't say we have exhaustively at all. We have talked to many folks, and I don't know if our uh, economy folks are on board, but they have interviewed some people. We did have some people on our advisory committee, and who were very vocal about what they liked and didn't like. But
we do have our economy folks on the line, and it looks like he's got his hand raised, probably to give an
I'll
answer.
let him
So
take the
yeah, we'll let
question then.
Benjamin Sigmund kind of speak to that.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So I agree with Brett, not exhaustive, but Ben Sigmund, I'm with the firm Economic and Planning Systems, and we did the economics related outreach associated with this project. And I just want to share that we started with a business database as well as a number of lists of interested business owners on Bethel Island. And essentially really tried to comprehensively establish the biggest and most sort of well-known businesses on the island and reach out to everyone who would talk to us. And we did, while it wasn't a formal survey, we did create a economics related interview guide and went around in person and talked to, it was 15 or so businesses, I want to say approaching 20, and spend about an hour with everyone we talked to, understanding their perspectives on the economic climate on Bethel Island and in the vicinity of Frank's Tract, and also their perspectives on the potentials for this project. And so that's all been documented in I think a forthcoming still report. But again, while not a sort of survey where we collected quantitative results of people's opinions of the project, we did do what I'd say at this point, for this kind of planning process, was a very robust outreach to the business community.
Great, thanks, Ben. Appreciate you being on the line. We'll move to a question from Greg Spohn. Go ahead, Greg.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I'm looking, or I was looking at your concept B map, and it looks like you have very few open areas for, there you go. Well, first of all, it looks like from south past Sugar Barge all the way to Russo's, the Bethel Harbor, you're going to dredge the opening there, not the opening, but that whole piece of water there you have, the dotted line is going to be 25 feet or deeper. So as far as not having enough stuff to make the levees bigger, I don't think that's going to be an issue, because you're talking a lot of dirt right there, a lot. I think you might be able to build a couple bridges with that too. And then over on to the east side, it says water for open water hunting blinds. Correct. I'm not sure. That's not a very big area. So you're talking maybe 3 or 4 or 5 floating blinds in that area at the most. Because now we're restricted to 400 yards around each blind. So if you were to use that concept, you wouldn't have any access to open water unless you're going to allow to hunt out of a boat, which we can't now. I don't know. And also on the where this ferry is, the velocity of that water that runs southward into Taylor Slough is very swift. So I doubt that a kayaker on an extremely tide that's pulling could even consider crossing that. So those are some of my concerns. As far as Dave from the Sugar Barge wanting some of Piper Slough dredged out, there's going to be so much sand and sediment and dirt in what you guys are proposing that I don't think you're even looking at that other side of that. So On a waterfowl note, this large, if we weren't to do anything, the map, the way it sits now, that open water is fresh water for the wild waterfowl, and they use that consistently, and it's in their migration, and they need that fresh water. So, you know, as far as habitat, you have all the islands around that flood their islands with corn. That's where the birds are going to go, and they come out to Frank's Tract to get the fresh water, to migrate south. You know, before there were any blinds there in Frank's Tract, there was thousands, tens of thousands of pintail, which is on the not endangered species, but it's definitely have hurt the population of the sprig, and they use that water consistently still, but there's just not as many sprig population. That's why we have a 1 sprig limit instead of 7. So that's another concern as far as the sprig population. And that's what they love, fresh water. That's what they like. That's why they're there. So that's my input. Thank you.
And let me just ask a clarifying question, Greg. Is the concern about the fresh open water, is it just that there will be a smaller area of open water with the project, or are you concerned about salinity changes?
Mostly open water.
Got it. Thanks.
What's your, I'd like to know what Carl thinks about that, as far as the migrating birds that use that area and have used it for eons. I mean, you're talking, you're going to have marshlands. How are you going to give somebody a blind like they have now and that's their spot? Or is it going to be open range where everybody's going to be fighting for a place to hunt?
Greg,
go ahead. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I think that would need to be sorted out. My expectation is that there would be, since it's a state recreation area, that there would continue to be a managed hunting program.
Okay.
Whether it's blinds in the open water areas or in designated areas within the marsh. But that would be something that I think, you know, it's a good point to raise and would need to be considered if planning continues on.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to follow that up too. I mean, we've definitely heard that from the hunters out there, that system of knowing that you can actually get a blind and have it, and you know, different from the Sherman Island model is really important. So that will be in anything we write up, that we know that that's really important to folks.
All right, I'm going to address some of the Q&A questions now. And folks can still raise their hands as we do this. But we have a question from JD Wickert. Says, it seems like the project is missing an opportunity to make things better for migrating juvenile salmon. And why is this not a higher priority for the project? So I think I'll take the first shot at this one. So we have looked at benefits to the project for salmonids, and primarily in the way of tidal marsh habitat and the creation of tidal marsh to be a food resource and produce some food there and refuge in the tidal marshes. And so we do have some metrics that look at salmon benefits to juvenile salmon. I don't know if there's more of a follow-up, if JD's still on the line.
So Kathleen, this is Carl. I think one of the concepts with the placing the land mass along False River is to provide a kind of an improved migratory corridor, particularly for juvenile salmon coming into the San Joaquin system, and improving rearing habitat and potentially reducing predator interactions by, let's say, directing fish into a more confined channel that's deeper and has a more conducive edge than, let's say, if they were to enter Frank's Tract as it is, which isn't a very happy place for a juvenile salmon, I don't think.
Thanks, Carl. All right, moving on to another question by Denise Eisenbase. Will construction be continuous year-round, or will there be pauses in construction based on wildlife timing, spawning windows, breeding times?
Yeah, so those kind of construction windows based around species needs will have to be part of the permitting process and negotiating those kind of pauses in construction and seasonality of construction with the agencies will definitely be part of the affect the construction schedule.
Thanks, Michelle. And let's see, we've got a question by Ron Petroche. Do you have plans to remove the dam on Sandmound Slough? Also, how tall are the new inner levees?
I guess I'll take a shot at that. We haven't been looking at that Sandmound Slough area, so that's a new issue that we've just been made aware of. And in terms of the new inner levees, I assume you're referring to the kind of where we're proposing to beef up those the sheltering levees around the perimeter of the tract. So that's a bit of a balancing act. We want them to be tall enough to, so that waves don't travel over them, to the levees that are actually protecting the surrounding levied islands, like Bethel Island, but low enough so that they're not going to be supporting trees growing on them or tall vegetation that would otherwise block views. So we're looking for kind of an in-between elevation. I don't remember offhand where we set that, but they're probably going to be a couple feet above the high water line, and will just have to be managed so that no tall vegetation comes onto them.
Thanks, Michelle. And we've got a follow-up from Jacob McCork on some of the salmon benefits. So Jacob, we're working to unmute you here. There we go. Go ahead, Jacob. Not getting a good audio from you. Sounds like you're trying, but it's not coming in very clear.
Jacob, you sound like one of the chipmunks.
And it sounds like he's at double speed.
It does. All right, while we're waiting to test out Jacob's microphone, we've got a follow-up regarding the blind hunting program. Ryan Goering from California State Parks says, State Parks would continue to manage the blind hunting program and will plan with all involved through this project to make sure it is done thoughtfully and with the hunters' concerns and needs in mind. There's a follow-up there. Thanks, Ryan. Jacob, it's not coming through. I'm not sure if you could type your answer out and we could read it aloud, but your microphone is not coming through well. There's a question from Matthew Anderson about, won't construction be limited by the Delta smelt, for example? There can't be pile driving during certain months of the year. And we kind of touched on that. There will be sensitive windows for special status species that will need to be addressed during the construction and permitting process. And we're getting to our 5 o'clock mark here. I know there's still some questions in the question and answer box. I'm not seeing many more raised hands.
Brett, it's Dan here. I think there was a request to put up again the website where people can get the survey, and just maybe leave it on the screen for a bit.
Thank you, Dan.
Is there any sort of chat window or Q&A window that people can cut and paste from that somebody might throw that into?
Yes, so I've answered it. I've posted it into the Q&A, into an answer to a question.
One thing.
I was just going to say, I assume everybody who registered for this webinar, we have their email addresses and we could send this out to them, hey, directly.
One thing for those who are still on, if you can do this on a computer rather than a phone, it's easier to navigate. You can do it on either. It's just it's a little more user friendly on a computer, but.
All right, we're getting our response from Jacob via the question and answer. So Jacob McQuirk would like to add that through studies out at Frank's Tract, we could determine if the north could be a good migratory pathway. If it is a pathway that we want to use, we could use engineering to keep them in that pathway. Thank you for your input there, Jacob. Sorry, we're having some mic troubles. Again, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our website if you'd like to review any of the information on it.
And we will be posting this link on the website right after this. So if you don't miss it here, you can always get the link to the survey there.
Mm-hmm.
So Kathleen, looking at the chat, there's a question from Ron Petrosh about dynamic compaction for the inner levees. I don't know, Michelle, Is that something you could speak to?
Maybe. Doing my best to channel our construction engineers here. So I think you're referring to some of the kind of more specific levee compaction methods when you're building a flood control levee. And I know there your level of compaction is really important. For the purposes of beefing up those perimeter levees around the edges of Frank Tract, we were really just thinking of something less engineered, probably a little less specific in terms of the compaction criteria, just getting some dirt up on there that will stay.
Nice.
Thanks. And Ron has his hand raised, and I think maybe he's trying to ask that question. Let's see. I think we can unmute Ron if you wanted to follow up.
Yes, I was just curious. I was just curious about how you are going to compact the dirt. We had a situation where they dropped a heavy weight out in the field to construct a project once before, and it shook our houses 500 foot away and put ripples in the water. I was just curious on how your compaction is going to be vibration, drop a massive weight, trucks running over it with water. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Okay. So like vibrations carry a long way in this environment, these kind of soils. I think that's something we're going to have to think about more. The kind of compaction and vibration parts of the project that I'm familiar with that have come up in our discussions have really been probably the putting posts in to hold silt curtains in place and using vibration to get those into the ground. So we probably have to be a bit more careful about timing for that, for species and for people.
Okay. The reason, can you still hear me?
Yep.
The reason I'm asking about it is, for example, because we have a lot of peat dirt out here, and if you're going to use some kind of weight, it will bounce, and it shakes everything within a long ways around. So I just want to let you know that. So
Yeah,
thanks.
Okay, that's all.
Thanks. We had a question from Randall Newdeck about how long it would take, I'm thinking, to build the project and what permits will be required. So that's kind of getting into next steps. But
sure, I can take a shot at that. Carl and others may have more to say. So in terms of the permits that'll be required, we recognize this would be construction in what's a very sensitive environment already that has species use. This isn't being constructed like out in the middle of a parking lot or something like that. It's got sensitive species use. So probably almost every environmental permit that that typically comes up in these kind of projects is going to be required here. So any impacts to wetlands, you'd need your core permit, permits from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, consultations with all the resource agencies. Permitting will be a pretty significant part of getting the project ready to be implemented.
thanks, Michelle. We've got a question.
That can be a lengthy process. I think that's what you're getting at with your question.
Thanks. We've got a question from Bill Wells about where does the sand come from for the beaches?
Yeah, Well, there's a lot of sand that's already out in Frank's Tract, buried with layers of peat and layers of sand. And when the folks at Moffett Nickel have looked at that, they've been really encouraged. Well, they've given us some guidance for where to put our borrow areas so that we are actually trying to get as much of the sandy materials and less of the peats in where we're dredging. So there's been some thought that's been put into those locations. So some of that sand that's coming out of the those dredge areas on Frank's Tract could be used to create the beaches. And if for some reason those sands aren't suitable, I would think that they could be, but there are also sources of sand that could be imported from San Francisco Bay.
Great.
Maybe a little cold.
All right, I'm looking through the questions here. I think we've gotten to the beef of a lot of them. If there's any more live questions you'd like answered, you can raise your hand using the little raise your hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen.
It's past 5.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you don't, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just noticing a couple of questions about fast water boating on the channels and such, and I just wanted to throw in there that the looking at an image of Frank's Tract on like a Google Earth sort of scale shot has been something that's taken us all a little bit by surprise sometimes. Those channels are actually the ones that go through the tract that are potentially the ones I think people are talking about being fast water probably would be plenty fast. They're quite similar to the surrounding channels in terms of width. It's part of the thing is just that when you throw that in the middle of what used to be a giant circle, it makes them look a little bit smaller, but they're not particularly small channels.
Thanks, Eli. We had a question about, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh yeah, just going through the questions, and I think that we have answered most of them. You're probably doing the same thing as me, Kathleen. There is a question about the hydraulic modeling that Mark Goebel asked right at the beginning. Has anyone given thought to using the Bay model in Marin, created by the Army Corps? It's easy to miss a little data in the computer modeling, harder with the Bay model. So Eli, what do you say about?
Well, first of all, I love hanging out with those guys at the Bay model and doing things with them. There are a few problems doing the velocities and hydrodynamics at the same time as the water quality. Everybody's probably heard the term scale model before, but you have to get everything has to scale properly to get models to work, and I don't think it would be the Bay model is actually not that detailed and not that able to replicate the physics. The other thing is that for every experiment that we do, we'd have to create essentially a new Bay model, meaning we'd have to throw, we need a lot of sponges and friction pieces and pieces because we're sort of imagining many different landscapes, and that I think is probably the cost reason why people don't use that model a little bit more. But it is, it's a really cool thing. We've gotten some requests to collaborate, and I would love to do that. But it's probably going to be more for the base case with the natural bathymetry than it would be for a large assortment of alternatives.
Thanks, Eli. Kind of as we wrap up here, Might be some closing statements, but there was a question about how many people were in attendance. And I think about when we were at our max, we had about 86 people on the line. So fairly good turnout, and hopefully all 86 participate in the user survey.
And again, please distribute this to whoever you think would have an interest or who it might affect. We'd appreciate as much feedback as we can get.
Yeah, and kind of on that note, some people were chiming in about how they heard about this meeting, and there was a few via Facebook and one via the Contra Costa Times. So it's those ways of reaching out. We
Yeah,
got
a
some
couple of the people
attendees.
have, sorry, Kathleen, I was just gonna say, if folks have any ideas for how we can make sure this gets into everybody's hands who should, please feel free to contact us. You know, there's an email on the website to contact us if you have any suggestions for how we distribute this, because we're trying really hard to get the word out there. And if you have ideas, let us know.
Well, thank you so much, Brett, for your presentation. Thank you, Kathleen, for manning the controls and making all of this go as smoothly as it did. So looking through the questions, I think we have addressed all of them. I think there are a few comments in there, so we will read through those and note those. And thank you for staying with us this long and giving us your feedback.
Yeah, thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.